The fluorescent lights of Murphy's diner buzzed with their usual monotonous hum, casting everything in that particular shade of tired yellow that made even the youngest customers look worn down. Chloe Bennett moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her sneakers squeaking softly against the checkered linoleum floor as she balanced plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes along her left arm. 25 years old, and this was her life. Not the life she'd imagined at 18 when she'd left her small hometown in Ohio, with dreams of something more. But it was honest work, and in a city like Chicago, honest work was something to be grateful for. "More coffee, sweetheart?" she asked the elderly man in booth 7, already reaching for the pot on the warmer behind the counter. He nodded, his weathered hands wrapped around the ceramic mug like it was the only warm thing he'd touched all day. Outside, October wind rattled the windows, carrying the smell of coming rain through every crack in the old building's frame. Chloe poured carefully, her mind already calculating. Rent was due in 5 days. She had about $400 in her account. Rent was $750. That meant she needed to pick up at least 2 more double shifts before the first, maybe 3 if she wanted to actually eat something other than ramen and the discounted day-old bread from the convenience store on the corner. "You're working yourself to the bone, Chloe," Maria called from the kitchen window, her thick accent turning Chloe's name into something musical. Maria had been working at Murphy's for 15 years, since she'd immigrated from Mexico. She treated the younger waitresses like daughters, which meant she worried constantly and fed them whenever possible. "I'm fine, Maria," Chloe called back, forcing brightness into her voice. "Just trying to make a living like everybody else." The dinner rush had finally started to thin out. It was nearly 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and the diner had settled into that quiet lull between dinner and the late-night crowd of students and insomniacs. The kind of moment where Chloe could almost breathe, could almost let her shoulders drop from where they'd been tensed up near her ears for the past 7 hours. She moved to the window, looking out at the street while she wiped down the counter. This neighborhood sat right on the edge of the financial district, where gleaming office buildings gave way to older brick structures that had seen better decades. During the day, it was all business suits and expensive coffee. At night it transformed into something else entirely, quieter, darker, with shadows that seemed to hold secrets. A black sedan rolled past slowly, then another. Chloe's hand paused in its circular wiping motion, some instinct she didn't quite understand making the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Maria, you see those cars?" But Maria was in the back, dealing with a problematic freezer that had been acting up all week. Chloe was alone in the front of the house with just 3 remaining customers. The elderly man, a young couple too wrapped up in each other to notice anything else, and a businessman typing furiously on his laptop in the corner booth. The third black sedan pulled up directly in front of the diner and stopped. Chloe's heart started beating faster. Something was wrong. She could feel it the way you can feel a storm coming, that electric charge in the air that makes everything seem too still, too quiet. The car door opened. What happened next would replay in Chloe's mind for months afterward, each detail crystal clear, as if her brain had understood the significance and recorded everything in high definition. A man stepped out of the sedan, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothes. He looked up and down the street, and even from inside the diner, Chloe could see the tension in his posture. Then he reached into his jacket. The gunfire started before she could process what she was seeing. The window didn't just break. It exploded inward in a shower of glass that seemed to hang suspended in the air for a fraction of a second, before gravity remembered to pull it down. Chloe dropped to the floor on pure instinct, her hands over her head as the sound of gunshots cracked through the air like thunder contained in a metal box. Screaming. The elderly man was screaming. The young couple had overturned their table in their scramble to get down. The businessman's laptop crashed to the floor. More gunfire. Different directions. The sharp crack, crack, crack of semi-automatic weapons punctuated by deeper booms that Chloe's shocked brain couldn't identify. Car engines revving, tires squealing against asphalt, men shouting in voices tight with adrenaline and violence. Chloe pressed herself against the floor, her cheek against the cold linoleum, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips, behind her eyes. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She served coffee and smiled at customers and worried about rent. She wasn't supposed to be in the middle of a shootout. The word materialized in her mind with awful clarity. She was in the middle of a shootout. Time did something strange, stretched out like taffy, each second containing what felt like minutes. Chloe became hyper-aware of everything. The smell of gunpowder mixing with the aroma of coffee and fried food. The sound of her own breathing harsh and fast in her ears. The way her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against the floor to keep them still. And then, in a brief pause between volleys of gunfire, she heard it, crying. A child crying. Chloe lifted her head just enough to see through the shattered window frame. The streetlight outside cast everything in stark orange and black shadows. 3 cars were stopped at odd angles in the street. Men crouched behind open car doors, weapons raised. Shell casings littered the pavement like deadly confetti. And there, frozen on the sidewalk not 15 feet from the diner, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. Dark hair, small frame, wearing what looked like an expensive jacket that was too big for him. He stood completely still in the middle of the chaos, his small hands clenched at his sides, tears streaming down his face, his mouth open in a silent scream that Chloe couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. No one else seemed to see him. The armed men were focused on each other, on their vehicles, on the tactical nightmare of the situation. But that little boy was completely exposed, standing in the direct line of fire. Chloe's mind went blank. Later, she wouldn't be able to explain what happened in that moment, why she did what she did. There was no conscious decision, no weighing of options, or calculating of risks. There was just the image of that terrified child and the absolute certainty that she had to move. Now, she was running before she realized she'd stood up. The distance from the diner door to where the boy stood felt infinite and instantaneous at the same time. Her legs moved, her lungs burned, and every cell in her body screamed at her that this was insane, that she was going to get herself eliminated, that no one was stupid enough to run toward gunfire. But she didn't stop. She hit the sidewalk at a full sprint, glass crunching under her shoes. Someone shouted something she couldn't understand. The gunfire stuttered, paused, or maybe it didn't pause. Maybe her brain just stopped processing it because all she could see was the boy. All she could think about was reaching him. 3 more steps. 2. 1. Chloe crashed into the child and wrapped her arms around him, her momentum carrying them both down to the concrete. She twisted her body at the last second, taking the impact on her shoulder and hip, curling herself around the boy's small frame as they hit the ground. Then she covered him completely with her own body, making herself as big as she could, pressing him down into the small amount of shelter provided by the raised edge of the curb. His little body shook violently against hers, his face buried in her chest, his hands fisting in her uniform shirt. The gunfire intensified. Chloe pressed her face against the top of the boy's head, her arms locked around him. Her entire world narrowed down to the feeling of his rapid heartbeat against her ribs and the desperate hope that her body was enough, that she was covering him completely, that nothing would get through. A bullet hit the lamppost above them with a metallic ping that made her flinch. Another buried itself in the brick wall of the building behind them, sending chips of masonry raining down on her back. The boy whimpered and Chloe found herself making sounds she'd never made before. Wordless, soothing noises meant to comfort, the kind of sounds a mother might make. She wasn't his mother. She didn't even know his name. But in that moment, with bullets flying and chaos erupting around them, he was hers to protect. "It's okay, baby," she heard herself saying, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I've got you. I've got you. Just keep your head down. Don't look. I've got you." The shooting seemed to go on forever. In reality, it probably lasted less than 2 minutes. But those 2 minutes contained entire lifetimes of fear and determination, and the strange, fierce protectiveness that had taken over Chloe's entire being. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. Chloe kept her position, her body still curved protectively around the child, her ears ringing so badly that the quiet felt like pressure, like being underwater. She heard car doors slamming, rapid footsteps on pavement, men's voices low and urgent. "Mason! Where's Mason? The kid! There! Someone's got the kid!" More footsteps, running this time, coming toward them. Chloe tightened her grip on the boy, Mason apparently, and lifted her head just enough to see who was approaching. Her vision swam slightly, shock starting to set in, making everything feel disconnected and surreal. 3 men in dark suits, all carrying weapons, all converging on their position. Behind them, more men, and multiple black SUVs with tinted windows that hadn't been there before. The original sedans were empty now. Doors hanging open, windows shot out. The first man to reach them dropped to one knee, his weapon lowering slightly as he took in the scene. He was young, maybe 30, with sharp features and eyes that swept over Chloe and Mason with professional assessment. "Mason, you hurt?" His voice was tight, controlled, but Chloe could hear the underlying note of fear in it. The boy, Mason, didn't respond, didn't move, his face still hidden against Chloe's chest. "Ma'am, I need you to let him go." The man's tone had shifted, becoming firmer. Not quite a command, but close. Chloe's arms tightened instinctively. Some primal part of her brain hadn't caught up to the fact that the immediate danger had passed. All it knew was that she'd claimed this child, had covered him with her own body, and letting go felt wrong. "Ma'am," the man reached out, and two of his companions raised their weapons slightly, not quite pointing them at her but making their presence known. That snapped Chloe back to reality. Her arms loosened and she started to sit up, carefully keeping Mason close until she was sure he was ready to move on his own. "It's okay," she whispered to him. "These are your people, right? You're safe now." Mason lifted his head slowly, his face blotchy and tear-stained, his dark eyes wide with shock. He looked at the men surrounding them, then back at Chloe, and his small hands tightened in her shirt. "Hey, Mason." The first man softened his voice, crouching lower to be at the boy's eye level. "Your dad's coming. He's going to be here any second, but we need to get you somewhere safe, okay?" At the mention of his father, Mason finally loosened his grip on Chloe. She helped him sit up, her hands checking him over automatically for any signs of injury. A scrape on his knee, probably from when she'd tackled him. Some dust on his expensive jacket, but otherwise, miraculously, he seemed unharmed. "You're okay," she breathed, relief making her voice shake. "You're okay." The sound of another vehicle approaching made all three men tense, hands moving back to their weapons. But whatever they saw made them relax fractionally, and one of them spoke into a radio at his collar. "We've got him. He's safe." Civilian female covered him during the firefight. The response was crackling and indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was not happy. A black SUV pulled up, its tires screeching slightly as it came to an abrupt stop. The back door flew open before the vehicle had fully stopped moving, and a man stepped out. Chloe's first thought was that he looked exactly like someone who should be stepping out of an expensive vehicle in the aftermath of a shootout. Tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", with broad shoulders filling out a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Chloe made in 3 months. Dark hair cut short, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that swept the scene with the kind of cold assessment that made Chloe's breath catch in her throat. This was a dangerous man. Every line of his body, every controlled movement, the way the other armed men unconsciously shifted to defer to him, it all screamed power and barely contained violence. But when those cold eyes landed on Mason, something changed. The ice cracked, just for a moment, and what Chloe saw underneath was raw fear mixed with relief so intense it was almost painful to witness. "Mason!" The word came out rough, abraded, like it had been dragged over broken glass. The little boy's face crumpled, and he scrambled up from where he sat next to Chloe, running the few steps into his father's arms. The man, Mason's father, dropped to one knee and caught his son, wrapping him in an embrace that looked fierce enough to hurt. He buried his face in Mason's hair, one large hand cradling the back of the boy's head, the other arm locked around his small body like he was trying to absorb him into himself. For a long moment they stayed like that, the dangerous man and the scared little boy, father and son, and despite everything, the guns, the shattered glass, the shell casings still smoking on the ground, there was something achingly human about the scene. Then Mason's father lifted his head, and his eyes found Chloe. She was still sitting on the sidewalk, her uniform torn and dirty, her hands scraped from the concrete, her entire body starting to shake as the adrenaline began to wear off. She probably looked exactly like what she was, a waitress who'd somehow ended up in the middle of a situation she had no business being in. The man's gaze traveled over her, taking in every detail with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place. Then he stood, lifting Mason with him, settling the boy on his hip in a way that looked both natural and strangely incongruous given everything else about him. He walked over to where Chloe sat, and suddenly she was looking up at him from the ground, feeling very small and very aware of exactly how much trouble she might be in. "You covered him." It wasn't a question. Chloe swallowed hard, finding her voice. He was just standing there, in the middle of everything. "I couldn't." Her voice cracked. I couldn't just leave him. Something flickered across the man's face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Like he couldn't quite comprehend why someone would do what she'd done. He studied her for another long moment, and Chloe had the uncomfortable feeling of being catalogued, assessed, filed away in some mental database of threats and assets. What's your name? Chloe. Chloe Bennett. He nodded slowly, then glanced at one of his men. Marcus, get her up. The man who'd first reached them, Marcus, moved forward and extended a hand. Chloe took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Her legs wobbled and she had to lock her knees to keep from falling. The world tilted slightly. Now that she was standing, she could see the full extent of what had happened. 2 of the original sedans had bullet holes punched through their doors and windows. The street was littered with glass and shell casings. In the distance, sirens were beginning to wail, but they sounded far away, like maybe they were taking their time getting here. I need to... Chloe gestured vaguely toward the diner. My boss. The other customers. I need to make sure everyone's okay. They're fine. Mason's father's voice was flat, authoritative. My people already checked. As if to confirm this, Chloe saw more suited men emerging from Murphy's diner, speaking into radios, coordinating something she didn't understand. I don't understand what's happening. The words came out small, confused. Who are you people? What was this? Mason's father exchanged a look with Marcus, something wordless passing between them. Then he looked back at Chloe, and she saw him come to some kind of decision. My name is Alexander Kane. Most people call me Alex. He shifted Mason slightly on his hip. This is my son, Mason, and what just happened here is something you're going to need to forget you ever saw. The way he said it, calm, matter of fact, like he was commenting on the weather, sent a chill down Chloe's spine that had nothing to do with the October cold. I don't think I can forget this, she said honestly. Alex's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. No, I don't think you can either. He paused. Which presents us with a problem. A problem? You saved my son's life. Alex's voice remained even, controlled. For that, you have my gratitude. But you also witnessed an incident involving people who don't take kindly to witnesses. Your face was seen. Your actions were noted, which means that as of about 3 minutes ago, you became a person of interest to some very dangerous individuals. Chloe's stomach dropped. I didn't see anything. I was just trying to help. I know what you were trying to do. Alex cut her off, not unkindly. And because of that, because you put yourself between my son and a bullet, I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you. But that means you're going to need to come with us. Come with you? Where? Somewhere safe. The sirens were getting closer now. Alex glanced toward the sound, his jaw tightening fractionally. We need to move. Now. He looked at Marcus. Get her in the car. Wait, what? No. Chloe took a step back, her heart starting to race again. I'm not going anywhere. I need to talk to the police, file a report. The police won't help you with what's coming. Alex's voice dropped lower, took on an edge that made it very clear this wasn't a negotiation. The people who ordered this hit on my vehicle don't leave loose ends. You're a loose end now. The only reason you're still standing here is because I have enough men to protect you right this second. But the moment I leave, you're exposed. Chloe looked around wildly, searching for someone to appeal to, but every face she saw belonged to one of Alex's people. The diner staff were inside, probably calling 911. The other customers were nowhere to be seen. She was surrounded by dangerous men who all deferred to the one holding his son and telling her she was coming with him whether she wanted to or not. Mason shifted in his father's arms, turning to look at Chloe. His tear-stained face was so young, so innocent despite everything he'd clearly been exposed to. When he spoke, his voice was small and hoarse from crying. Please come. You saved me. And Chloe felt her resistance crumble, because he was right. She had saved him. And now this man, this obviously powerful, obviously dangerous man, was telling her that act of instinctive heroism had painted a target on her back. How long? She asked quietly. How long would I need to go with you? Until I neutralized the threat. Alex's eyes held hers. Could be a few days. Could be longer. I have a job, an apartment, a life. I'll take care of it. You'll take care of it, Chloe repeated numbly. Just like that. Just like that. The sirens were very close now. Alex shifted his weight, preparing to leave, and Chloe realized with dawning horror that he wasn't bluffing. He was going to take her whether she agreed or not. The only question was whether she was going to fight it and make this harder on everyone, or if she was going to accept the impossible situation she'd landed in. She thought about that moment, watching Mason frozen in terror on the sidewalk. She thought about the absolute certainty she'd felt, the bone-deep knowledge that she had to protect him, and she thought about how that same protective instinct was now in Alex's eyes when he looked at his son. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe she really was in danger. Or maybe this was all some elaborate manipulation. But either way, she was surrounded by armed men who were clearly prepared to ensure she left with them. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Alex nodded once, sharp and approving. "Marcus, get her in the second vehicle. Make sure she's comfortable." Marcus took Chloe's elbow gently, guiding her toward one of the waiting SUVs. As they walked, Chloe looked back at the diner, at Murphy's, where she'd spent countless hours serving coffee and dreaming of something more. "Be careful what you wish for," she thought hysterically. The SUV's interior was all leather and tinted windows. Marcus helped her into the back seat, then climbed in beside her. Two more men got into the front, and suddenly they were moving, pulling away from the scene as police cars finally arrived, their lights painting everything in flashing red and blue. Through the window, Chloe saw Alex getting into his own vehicle with Mason. For just a moment their eyes met across the distance, and she saw something there she couldn't quite identify. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like regret. Then the SUV turned a corner, and Murphy's diner, along with her old life, disappeared from view. Chloe woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of golden morning light that seemed to exist only in movies or photographs of places she'd never been able to afford to visit. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed beneath her was too soft, the sheets too smooth, the room too quiet. Then memory crashed back like a wave, and she sat up so quickly her head spun. The shootout. Mason, Alexander Kane. She was in his house, or mansion, or compound. She wasn't entirely sure what to call the place they'd brought her to last night. The drive had taken nearly 45 minutes, leading them out of the city proper and into an area where properties were measured in acres rather than square feet, where walls and gates separated the wealthy from everyone else. Chloe looked around the room properly for the first time. It was easily 3 times the size of her entire apartment. Dove-gray walls, cream-colored furniture that looked like it belonged in an interior design magazine, abstract art that was probably worth more than she'd make in a year. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and utterly impersonal, like a very nice hotel room where no one actually lived. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet sinking into carpet so plush it felt like walking on clouds. She was still wearing her uniform from last night, stained, torn, smelling of coffee and fear. Someone had left a folded set of clothes on the chair by the door, and when Chloe picked them up she found soft gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, both with tags still attached. Her size. Exactly her size. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made her skin crawl. How did they know? How quickly had they gathered information about her? The attached bathroom was equally impressive, all marble and chrome, with a shower that had more settings than her car. Chloe stripped off her ruined uniform and stood under water hot enough to turn her skin pink, watching the grime and glass dust swirl down the drain while her mind raced. This was insane. She'd been taken from her life by a man who clearly operated outside the law, brought to his home against her will, and now she was showering in his guest bathroom like this was somehow normal, except he'd said she was in danger, that the people who'd attacked his vehicle would come after her because she'd witnessed the incident. Was that even true? Or was it just a convenient excuse to keep her here, to keep her from going to the police and telling them what she'd seen? Chloe pressed her forehead against the cool tile wall and tried to think clearly. What were her options? She could try to escape, but she'd seen the security last night. Gates, cameras, armed men patrolling the grounds. She could demand to leave, but something told her Alexander Kane wasn't in the habit of responding well to demands. She could comply, at least for now, and try to figure out what was really happening. That last option was the only one that didn't end with her potentially getting hurt. She dried off with towels softer than any she'd ever owned and put on the clothes that had been left for her. They fit perfectly, which was both convenient and unsettling. Then she took a deep breath and opened the bedroom door. The hallway beyond was wide and elegant, with hardwood floors that gleamed in the natural light from massive windows overlooking manicured grounds. Chloe could see the edge of what looked like a garden, and beyond that, a tall stone wall topped with discreet cameras. Beautiful prison, she thought. She heard voices coming from somewhere downstairs, low murmurs punctuated by the occasional clatter of dishes. Following the sound, she found a sweeping staircase that curved down into a massive foyer. More art on the walls, fresh flowers in a vase on a table that probably cost more than her car. The voices led her to a kitchen that was bigger than her entire apartment, all stainless steel and white marble, with an island in the center large enough to seat 8 people. A woman in her 50s stood at the stove, gray-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing an apron over simple black clothes. She looked up as Chloe entered, and her weathered face softened into something that might have been sympathy. "Good morning. You must be Chloe." Her accent was Eastern European, maybe Polish or Czech. "I'm Teresa. I manage the household. Are you hungry?" Chloe's stomach answered before she could, growling loudly enough to be embarrassing. She realized she hadn't eaten since her break at the diner yesterday, before everything had gone wrong. Yes, thank you." Teresa nodded and began pulling things from the refrigerator. "Sit. I'll make you breakfast. Mr. Kane wants to speak with you when you're ready, but he said you should eat first." "Where is he?" "His office, 3rd floor East Wing." Teresa cracked eggs into a pan with practiced efficiency. "But finish eating first. He won't be pleased if I send you up on an empty stomach." There was something almost motherly in her tone, despite the strangeness of the situation. Chloe sat at the island and watched Teresa cook, trying to organize her thoughts into questions that might get useful answers. "How long have you worked here?" 12 years, since Mason was born." "And Mason's mother?" Teresa's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. "Mrs. Kane passed away 2 years ago. Car accident." The words were delivered matter-of-factly, but Chloe heard the weight behind them. That must have been hard. For everyone. Very hard. Teresa slid a plate in front of Chloe. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit arranged beautifully. "Mason hasn't been the same since. Mr. Kane either, though he hides it better. Until last night." Chloe looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Teresa met her eyes, and there was something knowing in her gaze. "I heard what you did. The whole household knows by now. You saved that boy's life without thinking twice about your own. That means something to Mr. Kane, more than you probably realize." Before Chloe could respond, a door opened somewhere nearby and she heard the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. Mason appeared in the doorway, still wearing pajamas printed with cartoon dinosaurs. His dark hair stuck up in several directions, and his face was sleep-soft and open in a way it hadn't been last night. When he saw Chloe, he broke into a grin. "You're still here!" He ran to her, and Chloe barely had time to set down her fork before he crashed into her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. The gesture was so trusting, so affectionate that Chloe felt her throat tighten. "Hey, Mason." She awkwardly patted his back. "How are you feeling?" "Better." He pulled back to look up at her, his dark eyes, so like his father's, searching her face. "I had a bad dream, but then I remembered you were here, and I felt better. Teresa said you were sleeping, so I couldn't wake you up. I appreciate that." Chloe managed a small smile. "Sleep is important. Are you going to stay for breakfast?" "Teresa makes the best pancakes." Mason looked at the cook hopefully. "Can we have pancakes?" Teresa's stern expression melted into fondness. "I suppose we can. Go wash your hands." Mason ran off, his dinosaur pajamas flapping around his ankles. Teresa watched him go, then turned back to Chloe with a significant look. "That's the most animated I've seen him in months. Usually he barely speaks at breakfast. Nightmares have been constant since the funeral." The implication hung in the air. "You did this. Your presence makes him feel safe." Chloe felt the weight of it settling onto her shoulders like a physical thing. She'd saved Mason's life on instinct, without thinking about consequences. But now those consequences were becoming clear. A traumatized child who'd latched onto her as a source of comfort. A dangerous father who'd brought her into his home for reasons she still didn't fully understand. She was in deep, and she had no idea how to get out. Mason returned, hands dripping wet because he'd apparently forgotten to dry them. He climbed onto the stool next to Chloe and started chattering about his favorite dinosaur facts while Teresa made pancakes. Chloe found herself relaxing slightly despite everything, drawn in by the boy's enthusiasm and innocence. This was someone's child, someone's whole world. And last night she'd thrown herself over him without hesitation. She'd do it again, she realized. Even knowing where it had led her, even sitting in this gilded cage, she'd make the same choice. They were halfway through breakfast when Alexander Kane appeared in the doorway. He'd changed from last night's suit into dark jeans and a black shirt, casual clothes that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. His hair was damp like he'd recently showered, and when his eyes found Chloe, she felt that same intensity as before, like being examined under a microscope. "Good morning." His voice was calm, controlled, giving nothing away. "Morning, Dad." Mason's face lit up. "Chloe's having breakfast with us. Can she have lunch with us too? And dinner?" Alex's expression softened fractionally as he looked at his son. "We'll see. I need to talk to Chloe first. Adult conversation." Mason's face fell, but he nodded. "Okay, but she's coming back, right? She's not going anywhere." Alex's eyes moved back to Chloe. "When you're finished eating, my office. Teresa will show you the way." It wasn't a request. He left before Chloe could respond, and she found herself staring at the empty doorway, her appetite suddenly gone. "Don't worry too much," Teresa said quietly. "He's gruff, but he's fair, and he owes you a debt. He won't forget that." Chloe wasn't sure if that was supposed to be reassuring or not. 10 minutes later, Teresa led her through a maze of hallways to a heavy wooden door on the 3rd floor. The housekeeper knocked twice, waited for Alex's muffled, "Come in," then gave Chloe an encouraging nod before disappearing back down the hall. Chloe pushed open the door and stepped into a room that was somehow both impressive and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked actually read rather than decorative. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered with papers, laptops, and what looked like surveillance monitors showing various angles of the property. Alex stood at the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the grounds. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door." Chloe did, the heavy wood clicking shut with an ominous finality. "Sit." She moved to one of the leather chairs facing his desk and sat, her hands folded in her lap, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. Alex finally turned to face her, leaning against the window frame with his arms crossed. The morning light behind him cast his face partially in shadow, making his expression hard to read. "I've had my people looking into the situation from last night," he began without preamble. "The attack was ordered by the Moretti family. They're competitors of mine, and tensions have been escalating for the past 6 months. Last night was supposed to send a message." "What kind of competitors?" Chloe asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Alex's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The kind that operate outside traditional business structures. I own legitimate businesses, real estate, import or export, several restaurants and clubs. But some of my operations exist in gray areas." "You're talking about organized criminal activity." "I'm talking about business, but yes, some people would use that term." He moved away from the window, circling around to sit on the edge of his desk, closer to her. "The point is, the Morettis saw what you did. They have eyes everywhere, just like I do, which means they know you protected Mason. They know you can identify some of their people, and they know you're a potential weakness they can exploit." Chloe's mouth went dry. "So when you said I was in danger, I meant it. They won't hesitate to use you to get to me, either as leverage or to send another message. The only thing keeping you safe right now is that you're under my protection, in my house, surrounded by my security. For how long? Until I resolve the situation with the Morettis. Could be days, could be weeks." Alex's gaze held hers steadily. "I won't lie to you. This is a complicated situation. But I always take care of people who are under my protection. You'll be safe here. Safe, but not free. Would you prefer to be free and targeted?" His tone sharpened slightly. "I can arrange that if you'd like. Drop you back at your apartment? Post a guard or 2 outside and wait for the Morettis to make their move. See how long it takes before they decide you're worth the effort." Chloe's hands clenched in her lap. "You're saying I don't have a choice. You have a choice. Stay here, stay safe, stay alive. Or leave and take your chances with people who've eliminated witnesses for far less than what you saw last night." Alex's expression didn't change. "I know which one I'd choose. This is kidnapping. This is protection." He stood, moving back around his desk to pull something from a drawer. "I had Teresa pack up some things from your apartment this morning. Clothes, toiletries, your laptop. Your rent is paid through the end of the year. Your boss at the diner has been compensated for your sudden departure and believes you had a family emergency out of state." Chloe stared at him. "You did all of that since last night?" "I have efficient people." Alex slid a phone across the desk toward her. "New phone, secure line. Your old one had to be disposed of. Too easy to track. You can call anyone you need to, but conversations will be monitored for security purposes." The casual way he said it, like monitoring her calls, was perfectly reasonable, made Chloe's temper flare. "You had no right to go through my things, to make decisions about my life without consulting me. I had every right." Alex's voice went cold. "The moment you threw yourself over my son, you became my responsibility. I don't take that lightly. Your safety is now my priority, whether you like it or not. I'm not a child who needs... No, you're an adult who made a brave, stupid decision that put you in the crosshairs of dangerous people. Alex leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. I respect what you did. Mason is alive because of you, but respect doesn't change reality. The reality is that you're safer here than anywhere else, and until I neutralize the Moretti threat, this is where you stay. They stared at each other across the desk, tension crackling in the air between them. Chloe wanted to argue, to fight, to demand he let her go. But the rational part of her brain, the part that remembered the sound of gunfire and the feeling of bullets hitting concrete near her head, knew he was probably right. She hated that he was probably right. What am I supposed to do here? She asked finally, her voice tight. Just sit around in that beautiful room and wait? You're free to move around the house and grounds. There are books, a media room, a gym, a pool. Teresa will get you anything you need. Alex's tone softened very slightly. And Mason would appreciate your company. He's attached to you already. I noticed. His therapist says he's been struggling with attachment since his mother passed. Nightmares, anxiety, difficulty connecting with people. Alex looked away for the first time, a muscle working in his jaw. Last night he slept through the night for the first time in months, because he knew you were in the house. Chloe felt that weight settling onto her shoulders again. That's not fair. Using him to make me feel obligated to stay. I'm not using him. I'm stating facts. Alex met her eyes again. But if you want to help him while you're here, I won't stop you. He needs someone softer, someone who isn't part of my world. There was something in the way he said it that made Chloe pause, a hint of vulnerability, quickly masked, that suggested Alexander Kane might not be as completely in control as he pretended to be. Fine, she said quietly. I'll stay. But not because you're forcing me, because Mason deserves better than being caught in the middle of whatever war you're fighting. Alex nodded slowly. Agreed. He straightened, the businesslike mask sliding back into place. Teresa will show you around properly. If you need anything, ask her or Marcus. You met him last night. He's head of my security. Don't try to leave the property. The guards have orders to prevent that gently if possible. And if not gently, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Alex moved toward the door, clearly dismissing her. One more thing. There are areas of the house that are off limits. My private office on the 4th floor, the security wing, and the east basement. Don't go there. Or what? He paused with his hand on the doorknob, looking back at her with an expression that was impossible to read. Or you'll see parts of my world you can't unsee, and I'd rather keep you separate from that, if possible. Then he was gone, leaving Chloe alone in his office, surrounded by evidence of power and control, wondering what she'd gotten herself into, and whether there was any way out that didn't end badly for everyone involved. 5 days. Chloe had been in Alexander Kane's mansion for 5 days, and she still felt like she was living in some kind of surreal dream, the kind where everything looks perfect on the surface, but there's an undercurrent of danger that never quite goes away. She'd fallen into a routine of sorts. Mornings with Mason, helping him get ready for the day, eating breakfast together while he told her elaborate stories about dinosaurs or asked endless questions about everything. Afternoons exploring the grounds under the watchful eyes of security, or reading in the library, or trying not to think too hard about her life back in the city. Evenings were family dinners, a term that felt both accurate and completely wrong given the circumstances. Alex was there usually, quiet, controlled, watching the interactions between Chloe and his son with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Sometimes he'd join the conversation, his rare smiles transforming his face into something almost approachable. Other times he'd disappear into his office or take calls that sent him stalking out of the room with tension radiating from every line of his body. Chloe tried not to notice how good he looked in his tailored suits, tried not to feel the weight of his gaze when he thought she wasn't looking, tried not to wonder what it would be like to see the man behind the dangerous reputation. She was failing spectacularly at all three. On the 6th morning, she woke to the sound of raised voices somewhere in the house. Chloe pulled on the silk robe that had appeared in her closet, along with an entire wardrobe of clothes that fit perfectly and made her deeply uncomfortable, and stepped into the hallway. The voices were coming from downstairs. Alex's voice, low and controlled, but with an edge to it that made the hair on Chloe's arms stand up. And another voice, older, rougher, with an accent she couldn't quite place. She shouldn't eavesdrop. She knew that. But curiosity and a growing need to understand the world she'd been pulled into drove her forward, keeping close to the wall as she approached the top of the stairs. "Can't keep her here indefinitely," the unknown voice was saying. "It's been almost a week. People are asking questions. Let them ask." That was Alex, cold and final. "She stays until I say otherwise." The Morettis aren't backing down. If anything, they're escalating. 2 of our shipments intercepted last week, 3 of our people questioned by federal agents who are clearly on Moretti's payroll. This situation with the girl is a distraction we don't need. The girl has a name, and she's not a distraction, she's a responsibility. A pause. Then, "Since when do you take responsibility for civilians who get caught in the crossfire? Since one of them saved my son's life." Alex's voice dropped even lower, more dangerous. "I won't have this conversation again, Vincent. She stays. That's final." Footsteps moving toward the foyer. Chloe quickly retreated back down the hallway, her heart hammering. She'd just reached her bedroom door when she heard Mason's voice behind her. "Chloe, are you okay?" She turned to find him standing in the hallway in his pajamas, his stuffed dinosaur clutched in one hand, his dark eyes worried. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just couldn't sleep." She managed a smile. "How about you? Bad dreams?" Mason shook his head. "I heard Uncle Vincent. He always talks loud when he's upset." "Uncle Vincent?" "Dad's friend. He's been around since forever." Mason moved closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "He doesn't smile much. Kind of like Dad, but more so." Despite everything, Chloe found herself smiling. "Well, some people are just more serious than others. Come on, let's see if Teresa has breakfast started." They headed downstairs together, Mason's small hand in hers, chattering about a documentary he'd watched about velociraptors. As they approached the kitchen, Chloe heard the front door close. Vincent leaving, presumably. Alex stood in the hallway, his back to them, tension visible in his shoulders. He was on his phone, speaking in low, clipped tones. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who's talking to the feds and handle it. Quietly." A pause. "No, not that quietly. I want them out of the organization, not disappeared. We're not the Morettis." He turned and saw them, and something shifted in his expression. The hard edge softened fractionally as he looked at Mason. "Morning." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. "You're up early." "Chloe couldn't sleep," Mason announced. "Can we have waffles for breakfast?" "Ask Teresa. I'm sure she'll make whatever you want." Alex's eyes moved to Chloe. "I need to speak with you later. After breakfast." It wasn't a request. It never was. An hour later, Chloe found herself back in Alex's office, but this time the atmosphere was different. More tense. Alex stood at his desk, examining what looked like surveillance photos spread across the surface. "Come here," he said without looking up. Chloe approached, and when she saw what he was looking at, her blood ran cold. They were photos of her, outside her apartment building, at the diner, walking to the bus stop. Dozens of them taken from various angles, clearly surveillance shots. "Where did these come from?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "We intercepted them this morning. The Morettis have been watching you for the past month." Alex finally looked up, his expression grim. "They knew who you were before the incident. They knew your routine, your schedule, where you lived." Chloe felt her legs go weak. "Why? I'm nobody. I'm just—" "You worked at a diner 3 blocks from one of my offices. A diner where several of my people met regularly." Alex picked up one of the photos. Chloe serving coffee to a man in an expensive suit. "They were looking for weaknesses in my operation. People who might be useful as informants or leverage. But I never paid attention to your people. I barely remembered faces. They didn't know that. They were building a profile, waiting for the right moment to approach you." Alex's jaw tightened. "If you hadn't intervened during the attack, they would have gotten to you eventually anyway. Probably would have offered you money for information, then used that to blackmail you into providing more." Chloe wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. "So I was already trapped, even before I saved Mason." "Yes." Alex's voice was quiet. "I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner. Should have had my people checking for surveillance on civilian contacts. But I didn't, and now we're dealing with the consequences." He moved around the desk, and suddenly he was close enough that Chloe could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her head spin. "There's more. The Morettis sent a message this morning. They want to negotiate a truce, but they're demanding concessions. Territory, operations, and—" he paused. "Information about you. Where you are, what you know, whether you're cooperating with law enforcement." "What did you tell them?" "I told them to go to hell." Alex's voice was flat. I don't negotiate with people who target children, and I don't give up people under my protection. Even if it means more violence, more people getting hurt because of me, the violence was coming regardless. You're just a convenient excuse. His hand came up, almost touching her face before he seemed to catch himself and dropped it back to his side. This isn't your fault, Chloe. None of it is. But it felt like her fault. Felt like every decision she'd made had led to this moment. Trapped in a beautiful house, surrounded by danger, with a man who was either her protector or her captor, depending on how you looked at it. I heard you and Vincent this morning, she admitted quietly. He wants me gone. Alex's expression darkened. Vincent is my advisor, not my keeper. His opinion is noted and ignored. He's right, though. I am a distraction. You have a business to run, enemies to deal with. Having me here complicates everything. You're not a complication. Alex moved closer, and Chloe found herself backing up until her legs hit the chair behind her. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. For a man who always appeared in complete control, the uncertainty on his face was startling. Mason needs you, he finally said. And another pause. I need to know you're safe. That's not negotiable. There was something in his eyes, some emotion Chloe couldn't quite name. It made her breath catch, made her hyper-aware of how close he was standing, how the air between them seemed charged with unspoken things. Mr. Kane? Alex. For God's sake, call me Alex. His voice was rough now, strained. You've been living in my house for almost a week, eating meals with my son, and you still call me Mr. Kane like we're strangers. Aren't we? Chloe's heart was hammering. I don't know you. I don't know anything about you except that you're dangerous and powerful and you've taken over my entire life. Then ask. Ask me anything you want to know. It was a challenge and an invitation all at once. Chloe studied his face, the strong jaw, the intense eyes, the mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, and tried to see past the intimidating exterior to whatever lay beneath. Why do you do this? She asked finally. The criminal activity, the violence, all of it. You clearly have money. You could do anything. Why choose this? Alex was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved away, putting distance between them. And when he spoke, his voice was controlled again, but with an undertone of something raw. I was born into this world. My father ran these operations before me, and his father before him. I grew up learning that power is the only currency that matters, that weakness gets you destroyed, that family is everything and everyone else is expendable. He stared out the window. By the time I was old enough to understand I had choices, I'd already made decisions that locked me into this path. And then I met Diane, Mason's mother. Yes, something softened in his voice. She was completely outside this world, worked at an art gallery, loved museums and classical music and everything beautiful and clean that I wasn't. I tried to stay away from her, knew I'd only corrupt something pure, but she wouldn't let me. Chloe waited, sensing he needed to tell this story. She made me want to be better, made me believe I could be more than just my father's son, more than just the ruthless businessman everyone feared. We got married, had Mason, and for a while I thought maybe I could balance both worlds, keep her and Mason separate from the darkness. But you couldn't. No, the word was bitter. The car accident wasn't an accident. It took me 6 months to prove it, but the Morettis arranged it. Targeted her because they knew she was my weakness. She was pregnant with our second child when she passed away. Chloe's hand went to her mouth. Oh God. Alex, I'm so sorry. I handled the situation, made sure the people responsible paid the price, but it didn't bring her back, didn't undo the damage to Mason. He finally turned to look at Chloe again. After that, I swore I'd never let anyone get close enough to be used against me again, would never care about anyone outside of Mason enough to give my enemies leverage. The implications hung in the air between them. Alex was telling her something important, something that explained why her presence in his house was so complicated. And then I saved Mason, Chloe said quietly. And you brought me here, and I can't seem to keep my distance. Alex's voice was rough. You're under my roof, under my protection, and every day you're here makes it harder to remember why I need to stay detached. Chloe's breath caught. Alex, you make Mason laugh. You've gotten him to talk about his mother without shutting down. You've brought something into this house that hasn't been here since Diane passed away. Warmth, light, the feeling that this is a home instead of just a fortress. He took a step closer. And when I look at you, I don't see a complication or a responsibility. I see someone who threw herself into danger without hesitation to protect my child. Someone who's brave and kind, and completely unafraid of me despite knowing what I am. I am afraid of you, Chloe whispered. Just not the way you think. What way then? She couldn't believe she was about to say this. Couldn't believe the words were forming even as her rational mind screamed at her to stop. I'm afraid of the way I feel when you look at me. Like I'm the only person in the room. Like I matter in a way I've never mattered to anyone before. Her voice shook. I'm afraid because you're dangerous and complicated, and I should want nothing to do with you. But I can't stop thinking about what it would be like if you... She didn't get to finish the sentence. Alex closed the distance between them in 2 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce, and full of all the tension that had been building between them since that first night. His hands came up to cup her face, holding her like she was something precious and breakable, even as his mouth claimed hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Chloe's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing him back with equal desperation. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she shouldn't be doing. But God, it felt right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alex rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he said roughly. The worst, Chloe agreed. You should run. Should demand I let you go before this gets more complicated. I know, but you're not going to. It wasn't a question. Chloe pulled back enough to meet his eyes, seeing her own confused desire reflected there. No, I'm not going to run. Alex's thumb traced her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. I can't promise this will end well. My world is dangerous. People I care about get hurt. Then don't let me get hurt. Chloe's voice was steadier now. You said I'm under your protection. Protect me. From your enemies. From this situation. From whatever comes next. And who's going to protect you from me? It was the most vulnerable she'd ever heard him sound. Chloe reached up and covered his hand with hers. Maybe I don't need protection from you. Maybe what I need is for you to stop pushing everyone away and let someone in. Something in Alex's expression cracked. He pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair, holding her like she was an anchor in a storm. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me. Help me understand your world, understand you. Let me make my own choices about what I can handle. Before Alex could respond, a sharp knock on the door made them spring apart. Marcus entered without waiting for permission, his face tight with concern. Boss, we have a situation. The Morettis just hit one of our clubs downtown. 3 of our people are injured, 1 critical, and they left a message. Alex's entire demeanor shifted, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the cold mask of the crime boss. What kind of message? Marcus's eyes flicked to Chloe, then back to Alex. They're demanding you turn over the woman who witnessed the attack, or they'll escalate. They've given you 24 hours. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alex's hand instinctively moved to Chloe's back, protective and possessive. Tell them I have a message for them in return. Set up a meeting. Neutral ground, tomorrow night. His voice was ice. And double security on the house. No one gets in or out without my explicit approval. Marcus nodded and left. In the silence that followed, Chloe could practically feel the walls closing in. This is because of me, she said quietly. They're hurting your people to get to me. This is because the Morettis want war, and they're using you as an excuse. Alex turned to face her fully. But I meant what I said. I'm not giving you up. Not to them, not to anyone. What if I turned myself in? Went to the police, told them everything? No, the word was absolute. The police can't protect you from people like the Morettis. All that would accomplish is getting you into witness protection if you're lucky, or eliminated if you're not. So what do we do? Alex's jaw set in a hard line. I end this. Tomorrow night, I'm meeting with their leadership. I'm going to make it very clear that you're off limits, and if they continue to push, they'll face consequences they're not prepared for. That sounds like a threat. It is a threat. It's the only language they understand. He caught her hand, his grip tight. I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll stay in the house tomorrow night. Don't leave. Don't open doors. Don't go near windows. Marcus will have the security team on high alert. Alex, I don't want you getting hurt because of me. I won't. I'll have my best people with me. He pulled her closer. But I need to know you and Mason are safe here. That's the only way I can focus on what needs to be done. Chloe wanted to argue, wanted to find some other solution that didn't involve violence and danger, but she could see in Alex's eyes that this was happening whether she agreed or not. I promise. We'll stay safe. Alex nodded, then kissed her once more, softer this time, almost tender. This isn't over. Whatever happens tomorrow, we're not done figuring this out. I know. He left then, already on his phone, issuing orders and coordinating plans. Chloe stood in his office, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her mind reeling from how quickly everything had shifted. She'd fallen for him, despite every rational reason not to. Despite the danger and the impossibility of their situation, she'd fallen for Alexander Kane. And tomorrow night, he was going to walk into a meeting with people who wanted him gone, wanted her gone, wanted to tear apart everything he'd built. All she could do was wait, hope and pray that he'd come back to her in one piece. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Chloe tried to maintain normalcy for Mason's sake. They made breakfast together. Well, Mason mostly made a mess while Teresa supervised and Chloe cleaned up behind him. They watched a documentary about prehistoric marine life. They built an elaborate blanket fort in the living room that Mason declared was a velociraptor nest. But underneath every mundane activity, Chloe's mind was racing. Alex had left early that morning with barely a word, just a long look that promised he'd return and a brief touch of his hand to her cheek. She'd watched his convoy of SUVs disappear down the long driveway, and the knot in her stomach had been tightening ever since. Marcus had been true to his word about security. The house was locked down tight, armed guards stationed at every entrance, patrolling the grounds in pairs. The gate was closed and reinforced. Even the household staff seemed tense, moving through their duties with quiet efficiency and worried glances. "Is Dad going to be okay?" Mason asked as they sat in his blanket fort surrounded by stuffed dinosaurs and picture books. Chloe's heart clenched. The boy was perceptive, too perceptive for his age. He'd been through too much already, losing his mother, living in a world where danger was always present, learning too young that his father's work came with risks. "Your dad is very strong and very smart," she said carefully, "and he has good people protecting him. He'll be fine." That's what everyone said about Mommy. Mason's voice was small, that she'd be fine, but she wasn't. Chloe pulled him close. This child who'd lost so much, who'd somehow decided she was safe to love. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But your dad is going to do everything he can to come back to you. You're the most important thing in the world to him. You're important to him too now." Mason looked up at her with those dark eyes that were so like his father's. "I can tell. He looks at you the way he used to look at Mommy, like you make him happy even when everything else is bad." Out of the mouths of children. Chloe felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "Well, you make me happy. Even when everything else is scary and confusing, getting to know you has been the best part of all this." Mason hugged her tighter. "If Dad comes back safe, can you stay forever? Like a real family?" How was she supposed to answer that? Chloe settled for honesty. "I don't know what happens after tonight, sweetie, but I promise I won't disappear without saying goodbye. And no matter what, I'll always care about you." They stayed in the fort for another hour, reading stories and trying to pretend everything was normal. But when 5 o'clock came and went with no word from Alex, Chloe's anxiety reached a fever pitch. She got Mason settled with dinner and a movie in the media room, then found Marcus in the security office, surrounded by monitors showing every angle of the property. "Any word?" she asked from the doorway. Marcus looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "The meeting is happening now, should be wrapping up within the hour. And if it doesn't, if something goes wrong, then we follow the contingency plans." Marcus gestured to a chair. "You might as well sit. The waiting is the hardest part." Chloe sat, her eyes scanning the monitors. Everything looked quiet, almost too quiet. "How long have you worked for Alex?" she asked, needing conversation to distract from the knot of worry in her chest. 10 years. Started as a driver, worked my way up." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "He's a good boss. Fair, loyal to his people, doesn't ask anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. But dangerous." "Yeah, dangerous." Marcus studied her. "You know what you're getting into with him?" "I'm starting to understand." "Are you?" His tone was gentle but skeptical. "Because this life, what we do, who we are, it's not something you can dip your toe into. You're either all in, or you need to walk away before you get hurt. I think it's too late for walking away." "Maybe, but you should know, the boss, he's different around you. Softer, more human." Marcus's expression turned serious. "That's good for him, good for Mason. But it also makes him vulnerable in ways he hasn't been since Mrs. Kane passed away. His enemies will see that, they'll use it. So, what am I supposed to do? Leave to keep him safe? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, Be prepared for what comes with staying. This world doesn't forgive weakness, and caring about someone is the ultimate weakness. Before Chloe could respond, one of the monitors flickered. Marcus's attention snapped to it immediately, his entire body going tense. Movement at the south perimeter. 2 vehicles approaching. Is it Alex? Too soon. Meeting shouldn't be done yet. Marcus was already on his radio, issuing rapid commands. All units, possible breach at South Gate. Lock down the house, now. Alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed in the hallways. Within seconds, Chloe heard the heavy thud of steel shutters descending over windows, the electronic locks engaging on all the doors. Come with me. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the security office. We need to get you and Mason to the safe room. They ran through the house, Marcus speaking urgently into his radio. Chloe's heart hammered as they reached the media room where Mason sat frozen on the couch, his eyes wide with fear. Mason, come here, baby. Chloe held out her hand, keeping her voice calm despite the panic coursing through her. We need to go somewhere safe for a little while. Is it the bad people? The ones who hurt Mommy? I don't know, but your dad has plans for situations like this and we need to follow them, okay? Mason ran to her, and she scooped him up even though he was getting too big to carry. Marcus led them down a hallway Chloe had never been in before, to a door that required both a key code and a fingerprint scan. The safe room beyond was like something out of a spy movie. Reinforced walls, its own ventilation system, monitors showing security feeds, shelves stocked with supplies, a small bathroom in the corner, a couple of beds along one wall. Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but me or the boss. Marcus handed her a phone. This is a direct line to the security office. If something happens to me, call this number. He scribbled digits on a notepad. It's a backup line to Vincent. He'll know what to do. Marcus, what's happening out there? I don't know yet, but I'm not taking chances with you or the kid. He moved toward the door. Lock this behind me. 3-inch steel reinforced with titanium. Nothing's getting through it. The door closed with a heavy thunk and Chloe engaged the lock with shaking hands. Mason clung to her, his small body trembling. It's going to be okay, she whispered, carrying him to one of the beds and sitting down with him in her lap. Your dad prepared for this. We're safe here. On the monitors, she could see security personnel taking positions throughout the house. The vehicles Marcus had spotted were now visible on the South Gate camera. 2 black vans with no plates. Men in tactical gear poured out, at least a dozen of them. They didn't bother with the gate. One produced bolt cutters and went to work on the chain while others provided cover. This is bad, Chloe breathed. This is really bad. She grabbed the phone Marcus had given her and dialed the number he'd written down. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Vincent. It's Chloe Bennett. We're in the safe room. There are armed men breaking through the South Gate. I know. Marcus radioed me. Alex is on his way back now. Vincent's tone was clipped. The Morettis used the meeting as a distraction. They never intended to negotiate. They wanted Alex away from the house so they could make a move on you and the boy. Chloe's blood ran cold. How long until Alex gets here? 20 minutes, maybe less. He's driving like hell. Can the security team hold that long? On the monitors, gunfire erupted. The security guards at the south entrance engaged the intruders, but they were outnumbered. Chloe watched in horror as the tactical team advanced with professional precision, using the vehicles and landscaping as cover. I don't know, she whispered. There's so many of them. The safe room will hold. It's designed to withstand a siege. Just stay locked in and wait for Alex. Vincent paused. And Bennett? Keep Mason calm. That boy's been through enough. The line went dead. Chloe set the phone aside and wrapped both arms around Mason, who was watching the monitors with wide, terrified eyes. Don't watch, sweetheart. Look at me instead. She cupped his face, forcing him to focus on her instead of the violence playing out on the screens. Remember that blanket fort we built? Let's talk about that. You said it was a velociraptor nest. Tell me about the velociraptors who live there. Mason's voice shook, but he started talking, spinning an elaborate story about dinosaur families and their adventures. Chloe kept her eyes on him, nodding and asking questions while her peripheral vision tracked the monitors. The tactical team had breached the first line of defense. 3 of Alex's security guards were down, either injured or eliminated. She couldn't tell from the grainy footage. Marcus was coordinating the defense from inside the house, his team falling back to more defensible positions. But the intruders kept coming. They moved with military precision, clearing rooms systematically, clearly searching for something specific. For her, And Mason. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The sounds of gunfire echoed through the house, even through the safe room's thick walls. Mason had stopped talking, just pressed against Chloe's chest with his hands over his ears. On the monitor showing the main entrance, headlights suddenly appeared. Multiple vehicles screeching to a halt, doors flying open before they'd fully stopped. Alex emerged from the lead SUV like an avenging angel, his suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a weapon in his hand. Behind him, at least 20 men poured out, heavily armed and clearly ready for war. "He's here," Chloe breathed. "Mason, your dad's here." What followed was controlled chaos. Alex's reinforcements swept through the house with brutal efficiency, catching the tactical team in a pincer movement. The intruders tried to retreat, but they'd pushed too deep into the house and now found themselves trapped. It was over in less than 5 minutes. On the monitors, Chloe watched Alex's people systematically neutralize the threat, moving from room to room until the house was secure. Then Alex himself appeared on the monitor, showing the hallway outside the safe room. His face was set in hard lines, blood spattered on his shirt. Whether his or someone else's, Chloe couldn't tell. He looked like exactly what he was in that moment. A dangerous man who'd just fought his way through hostile forces to reach his family. He approached the safe room door and spoke, his voice muffled but audible through the reinforced steel. "Chloe, Mason, it's me. It's safe to come out now." Mason scrambled off Chloe's lap and ran to the door. Dad, we're okay." Chloe engaged the locks with shaking hands and the door swung open. Alex swept Mason up with one arm, his weapon still in the other hand, his eyes scanning his son for any sign of injury. "You're not hurt? Neither of you?" "We're fine." Chloe's voice cracked. "We stayed in here like Marcus said. Alex, your people. 3 injured, none critical. We got here in time." He set Mason down and pulled Chloe close with his free arm, holding them both. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated this. Should have had more security. You couldn't have known they'd attack while you were at the meeting." "I should have." Alex's jaw was tight with anger, but his hold on them was gentle. "This ends now. Tonight." He pulled back and handed his weapon to Marcus, who'd appeared in the doorway. Then he knelt down to Mason's level. "Buddy, I need you to be really brave right now. Can you do that for me?" Mason nodded, his face pale but determined. "Good. I need you to stay with Teresa and Marcus. They're going to take you somewhere even safer while I finish handling the situation. Chloe's going with you." "No." Mason's voice was small but firm. "Don't leave again. You just got back." "I know. But there are people who tried to hurt you tonight, and I need to make sure they never try again." Alex's voice softened. "I promise I'll come back. And when I do, we're going to figure out how to make sure this never happens again. Okay? You promise? You really promise?" "I promise." Alex pulled his son into a fierce hug. "I love you, Mason. More than anything in this world." "I love you too, Dad." Alex stood and looked at Chloe, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Keep him safe. Always." She paused. "But Alex, what are you going to do?" "What I should have done weeks ago. I'm ending the war with the Morettis. Permanently." The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. This was the other side of Alexander Kane. Not the protective father or the man who'd kissed her with desperate tenderness, but the crime boss who'd built an empire on power and fear. "Be careful," she whispered. He caught her hand, squeezed once. "I'll come back to you. Both of you. That's a promise too." Then he was gone, striding down the hallway issuing orders, Marcus and a dozen armed men following in his wake. Teresa appeared, her face drawn but calm. "Come, both of you. We're going to the north wing. It's completely secure, and there's a lovely suite where you can rest." Chloe let herself be led away, Mason's hand tight in hers. Behind them, she heard vehicles starting up, more of Alex's people mobilizing for whatever came next. 4 hours later, Chloe sat in a plush armchair watching Mason sleep on the couch, his stuffed dinosaur clutched tight. Teresa had brought them food that neither of them could eat, had assured them repeatedly that everything would be fine, that Mr. Kane always kept his promises. But as the hours stretched on, Chloe's worry grew. What if something went wrong? What if Alex's need to protect them, his determination to end this threat, got him hurt, or worse? She couldn't lose him. The realization hit her with startling clarity. Somewhere in the past week, Alexander Kane had become essential to her, not just because he'd given her safety, not just because of the attraction that sparked between them, but because she'd seen the man beneath the reputation, the devoted father, the leader who protected his people. The damaged soul trying to build something good in a world that constantly demanded darkness from him. She loved him. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it settled into her chest like a weight and an anchor all at once. The door opened and Chloe's head snapped up. Alex stood in the doorway, and the relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. He looked exhausted, his shirt still blood-stained, shadows under his eyes. But he was alive. He was here. Chloe crossed the room in 3 strides and threw her arms around him, not caring about propriety or caution or anything except the solid warmth of him against her. "You came back. I promised." Alex's arms came around her, holding tight. "It's done. The Morettis have agreed to a permanent ceasefire. The people who ordered tonight's attack have been handled. You and Mason are safe now. What did you do? What needed to be done?" His voice was rough. "I won't apologize for protecting what's mine." He pulled back enough to look at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "I almost lost you tonight. Both of you. When I got that call from Vincent, when I realized they'd used the meeting to get me away from the house. But you didn't lose us. We're okay. This time. But there'll be other threats, other enemies. This life I lead, it's never really safe." Alex's hand came up to cup her face. "I can't ask you to stay in it. Can't ask you to put yourself at risk for me. You're not asking. I'm choosing." Chloe covered his hand with hers. "I could have run a dozen times this past week. Could have demanded you let me go, but I didn't because being here, being with you and Mason, it feels right in a way nothing else in my life ever has. Chloe, I love you." The words came out firm, certain. "I know it's fast and probably crazy and definitely complicated, but I love you. I love your son, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." Alex stared at her for a long moment, emotions flickering across his face too fast to track. Then he kissed her, deep and claiming and full of everything he couldn't put into words. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too. God help us both, but I do. You've brought light into a darkness I thought was permanent. You've given Mason something I couldn't. Hope that we can be more than just survivors. So what happens now?" "Now?" Alex pulled back with the ghost of a smile. "Now we figure out how to make this work. How to build a life that includes all of us." A sleepy voice interrupted them. "Dad?" They turned to find Mason sitting up on the couch, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Alex, his face lit up and he scrambled off the couch and ran to his father. Alex caught him, lifting him easily despite his exhaustion. "Hey, buddy. Everything's okay now. The bad people are gone. They won't bother us anymore. I made sure of it." Mason looked from his father to Chloe, then back again. "So Chloe can stay? For real?" Alex met Chloe's eyes over his son's head. "If she wants to. If she's willing to take on both of us and all the complications we come with." Chloe moved closer, completing their circle. "I want to. More than anything." Mason threw one arm around her neck while keeping the other around his father, pulling them all together. "We're a family now. A real family." And standing there in the quiet aftermath of violence and fear, wrapped in Alex's free arm with Mason between them, Chloe realized that's exactly what they were. Not a conventional family, not a simple or uncomplicated one, but a family built on choice and sacrifice and love that had grown in impossible circumstances. Alex pressed a kiss to Mason's head, then reached out to brush Chloe's cheek with gentle fingers. "I can't promise it will always be easy. My world is still dangerous, still complicated, but I can promise I'll protect you both with everything I have, that you'll always have a place here, a home here. That's all I need," Chloe said softly. "You, Mason, and a chance to build something real together." 3 months later, Chloe woke to winter sunlight streaming through windows that were now familiar, in a bed that had become hers in a room she shared with the man who'd somehow become her entire world. Alex was already awake, propped up on one elbow watching her with an expression that still made her heart skip. "Morning," she murmured, stretching. "Morning." He leaned down to kiss her, slow and sweet. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," she smiled. "Though that might have something to do with present company. Might have something to do with the fact that you're not working double shifts at a diner anymore." Alex's tone was teasing, but there was satisfaction in it too. In the 3 months since that terrifying night, Chloe's life had transformed completely. She'd officially moved into the mansion, her tiny apartment packed up, and the lease transferred. She'd started taking online classes toward the degree she'd always wanted but never been able to afford, and she'd become an integral part of Mason's life, not replacing his mother, but offering a different kind of love that the boy soaked up like a plant starved for sunlight. Alex had been true to his word. The Morettis had backed down, the truce holding firm. His business operations continued, but he'd made changes, reducing the more dangerous aspects, focusing more on legitimate enterprises. He'd never be completely clean, but he was trying, and Chloe knew that was largely for her sake, for Mason's. "Did I hear the monster stirring?" Alex asked, cocking his head toward the door. As if on cue, small footsteps thundered down the hallway, and Mason burst through the door without knocking, a habit they'd been trying to break him of with limited success. "Dad, Chloe, it snowed. Can we build a snowman?" Mason had changed too. The nightmares had mostly stopped. He smiled more, laughed freely, talked about his mother without the crushing sadness that used to accompany her memory. His therapist said he was thriving, that having Chloe as a stable, loving presence had made all the difference. "After breakfast," Chloe said, sitting up and holding out her arms. Mason immediately climbed onto the bed, wiggling between them with the easy confidence of a child who knew he was completely loved and safe. "Can we give him a carrot nose? And rocks for eyes? And maybe a scarf? Whatever you want, buddy." Alex ruffled his son's hair, and the casual affection in the gesture made Chloe's chest tight with emotion. This was her family now. Not the one she'd been born into, not the one she'd planned for, but the one she'd chosen when she threw herself over a terrified child in the middle of gunfire. She'd saved Mason that night, but in a way, he'd saved her too. Saved her from a life of just surviving, from never knowing what it felt like to be truly loved and needed. "Race you downstairs," Mason challenged, already scrambling off the bed. "You're on." Chloe laughed and followed, with Alex close behind. They spent the morning building the most elaborate snowman the Kane property had ever seen, complete with a top hat Marcus donated, and stones for buttons that Teresa provided. Mason directed the operation like a pint-sized general, while Chloe and Alex did most of the actual work, stealing kisses when their son wasn't looking. Later, after hot chocolate and lunch, Mason fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Alex carried him upstairs to his room, tucking him in with a tenderness that always made Chloe's heart squeeze. She found Alex afterward in his office, staring out the window at their snowman creation, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked from the doorway. He turned, his face softening when he saw her. How different life is now, how much lighter everything feels. Chloe crossed to him, and he pulled her into his arms, her back against his chest, both of them looking out at the winter landscape. "I never thought I'd have this again," Alex said quietly. "After Diane, I convinced myself I was better off alone, that caring for anyone outside of Mason was too dangerous, too much of a risk. And now I know that living without love isn't really living at all. It's just existing." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You taught me that. You and your stubborn refusal to be afraid of me." "I was afraid," Chloe corrected. "Just not enough to walk away. Best decision you ever made." There was a smile in his voice. "Second best," Chloe countered. "The best was saving Mason. That gave you both to me. So I'm counting it as the same decision." Alex turned her in his arms to face him. "I know this wasn't the life you planned. Working toward your degree while living with a reformed criminal and his son, navigating a world that's still complicated and sometimes dangerous. Plans change. And honestly," Chloe reached up to cup his face, "this life is better than anything I could have planned. I have a family, a purpose, a man who looks at me like I'm his entire world. You are my entire world. You and Mason both." Alex's expression turned serious. "Which is why I need to ask you something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Chloe's breath caught. "I know it hasn't been long. I know there are 1,000 reasons why we should wait. But I've learned that life is short and love is rare. And when you find both together, you don't let it go." He opened the box to reveal a ring. Elegant, beautiful, perfect. "Marry me, Chloe. Make this official. Let me give you my name, my protection, everything I am." Tears blurred Chloe's vision. "Yes. God, yes." Alex slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a depth of emotion that took her breath away. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Should we tell Mason?" Chloe asked. "Let him sleep. We'll tell him at dinner. He's been asking me for weeks when I was going to make you his real mom." Alex's smile turned sheepish. "I may have mentioned I was planning to ask. You told him before you asked me? He's a key stakeholder in this decision." Alex was completely unrepentant. Had to make sure he approved. Chloe laughed and pulled him close again. I love you, both of you, so much. We love you too. Alex held her tight, and Chloe felt the last pieces of her old life, the loneliness, the fear, the uncertainty, fall away completely. She'd been a waitress serving tables and trying to survive. Now she was engaged to be married, a mother figure to an incredible child, a woman who'd found her place in the most unexpected circumstances. That night at dinner, when they told Mason, his whoop of joy could probably be heard throughout the entire mansion. He insisted on calling Teresa and Marcus immediately to share the news, then spent the rest of the evening planning the wedding with the seriousness of a professional event coordinator. Later, after Mason was finally asleep and Alex and Chloe were alone in their room, she found herself thinking about that night outside the diner, the sound of gunfire, the terror of seeing a child in danger, the split-second decision that had changed everything. What are you thinking about? Alex asked, pulling her closer in the darkness. That night, when I saw Mason standing there, Chloe's voice was soft. I didn't think. I just ran, and it seemed like the craziest thing I'd ever done. It was the craziest thing you'd ever done, but it brought me here, to you, to this life. She turned to face him. I saved a boy in the Crossfire, and his father claimed both of us as his family. If someone had told me that's how my life would change, I never would have believed it. Are you glad it did? Change, I mean. Chloe thought about her old apartment, her exhausting job, the loneliness that had been her constant companion. Then she thought about Mason's laughter, Teresa's motherly concern, the security and comfort of this home. Most of all, she thought about Alex. Complicated, dangerous, devoted Alex who looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. I'm glad, she said firmly. I wouldn't change a single thing. Alex kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Good, because you're stuck with us now. Me, Mason, this chaotic life. No escape. I don't want to escape. Chloe smiled against his mouth. I'm exactly where I belong. And as she drifted off to sleep in Alex's arms, in the house that had become her home, with the ring on her finger and the knowledge that tomorrow Mason would wake up excited about wedding plans, Chloe knew it was true. She'd thrown herself into danger to protect a child she didn't know, and in return, she'd gained everything she'd never known she needed. Love, family, belonging, and a future that was bright despite its complicated edges. Some people spend their whole lives searching for home. Chloe had found hers in the most unexpected place with the most unexpected family, and she wouldn't have it any other way.